Well, good evening, viewers. Look what we have here. A 2014 Chevy Silverado High Country 4x4 crew cab. It's here for a problem with the check engine light being on. Start it up. Customer reports the check engine light is on. He's had a couple people look at it and they've said there's been misfire codes. He's reported that the check engine light has on occasion been flashing, which would indicate a significant misfire. Right now it feels fairly smooth. It's got 140,000 kilometers on it, so it's not really high mileage. Well, we're going to connect the scan tool and do a network code scan and see what comes up. So let's see if this single auto ID. This is a new vehicle record. I've never worked on this car or this truck before. And I would expect it to automatically ID, and it automatically ID'd and automatically pulled the VIN number. Now let's do a network code scan. GM will allow you to scan the network on a running vehicle. Well, as I figured. Spark plug or engine misfire detected. P050D, cold start, rough idle. Since power up. P219A, fuel trim cylinder bank 1. Well, I've had P219B, which is the same code but for bank 2. So this fuel trim code could be caused by the misfire. Now it says random misfire. Universal serial bus circuit and the human interface. Control module below voltage, lost communication with HVAC. Okay, those are all. That's funny. In the OBD2 side of the computer, it has a P0300, yet in the manufacturer enhanced side, it's P0300. Let's see what the misfire data is in the data list. So we're going to go straight into the engine. You don't want to clear the codes because we'll lose the misfire counters in the misfire report. So here's misfire data. It's not currently misfiring, at least it doesn't feel like it is. It's misfire history 2, 1, over here on this side. Misfire history, cylinder number 3, 9,770, cylinder 1, 336. 5 has got 3 misfires and 7 has 0. So that's bank 1. And misfire history 2468. So it's got some misfires, a couple misfires on the other bank, but the majority of the misfires are on number 3 according to this. Let's look at freeze frame data. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to pause this and save it. Okay, so I've saved that misfire recording. And we're going to look at, oh, it was in the engine and codes menu, my mistake. Codes menu, freeze frame failure records. Let's see what was happening at the time of that random misfire being reported, and also this cold start. So we'll look at the misfire record. We're interested in the temperature and the time. Distance since failure, 145 kilometers. So it's fairly recent. Distance since last failure, 2,075 kilometers. 30 cycles ago. Distance since DTC's cleared, 2,079. So at the time of this code setting, it was 44 Celsius. The ambient air temperature was 25. I'm concerned about the run time. Also the fuel trim. Long-term fuel trim and short-term fuel trim are 5 and 1 on bank 1 and 0 and 0 on bank 2. So it is adding a little bit, but anything under 10% is considered to be acceptable. Fuel enrichment, fuel rail pressure sensor, power enrichment. Now it could have a leaking injector on that bank, and that could result in a misfire on a restart. Engine run time, 40 seconds. So this fault code set 40 seconds after starting. It probably wasn't even in closed loop yet. It was sitting still, basically idling. What was the engine speed? Engine load 29%. It was in open loop still, so the fuel trims are irrelevant now. And what was the engine RPM? 1174. So just off idle. Accelerator pedal, it was just on fast idle, that's all it was, because the accelerator pedal position is at 0. So 40 seconds after a startup, it's misfiring. That could be an injector that leaks down after shutting off the vehicle, resulting in a rich condition in that cylinder, and that could also cause the P019A or whatever that code was. Let's have a look at the freeze frame data for that code. I'm actually going to save that freeze frame data, but I want to look at this cold start, P050D. See what was happening at that time. There's so many things that can cause this, from carbon on the intake valves and the intake ports, to leaky injectors, to spark plugs, to coils, to plug wires, to O2 sensors. Why is this not loading? That's not very good. That's weird. Not loading that freeze frame data. Huh. P000 cold start rough idle symptom 00. Wow, that's weird. So some reason it didn't record that. Well, let's try this fuel trim balance bank 1. Why isn't it reporting this freeze frame data correctly? It did for the first one. Let's go back and view this one again one more time, just for the hell of it. Well, I've never seen that before, where it only reports the fault code and none of the data. Well, that's secondary. At least we know it happened on a cold start. So again, it's not misfiring now, but we're going to look at some data here. Let's look at fuel trim data right now. It's idling, it's warming up. Short-term fuel trim is 0 and 2. Long-term fuel trim 4 and 2. And it should be in closed loop. It's 73 Celsius, so it's not up to temperature yet. Recommended maximum fuel alcohol content, fuel composition learning. Let's see what the fuel content is like. Alcohol content. Where is that? Fuel alcohol content 2%. So it hasn't mislearned the alcohol content. We don't have ethanol fuel here in where I live in Thunder Bay. It's been running for 10 minutes. Okay, let's look at, we're going to look at the fuel pressure in the high pressure fuel rail. Fuel system should be in this data list. And we're going to see if the fuel pressure holds or actually climbs or drops. Fuel pressure sensor voltage, and fuel rail pressure sensor in PSI. So we're going to watch the fuel rail pressure when I shut it down and turn the key on. And as the engine goes through a hot soak, the fuel pressure should actually climb. So I'm going to go shut it off. Okay, well, I didn't shut it off. I had to answer the phone. So now I'm going to shut it off. Okay, well, that's a good sign. Note that the fuel pressure is climbing as it's going through a hot soak. That's because the heat from the engine is warming the fuel rail, and there's no cool fuel coming in because nothing's being consumed, and it's normal for the fuel pressure to rise. I've seen it go as high as 2,000 psi. If it actually dropped, and I have some videos on my channel where you can see the fuel pressure dropping. A couple were Audis. Same idea, same kind of fuel system. One or more of the injectors is seeping into a cylinder, and of course that could result in overfueling in that cylinder and then a flooded condition in that cylinder when we start the vehicle. And because it's in open loop, you won't see it in the fuel trims, but it'll run rough and stumble for a few seconds. Based on the fact that the fuel pressure is rising here, I don't think the injectors are seeping. Let's let it sit for a few minutes and see how long it takes, see how high it goes. So you can see in the length of time it took me to take out the spark plug in number 3 cylinder to view it and look at it, plus another 10 minutes or so, it's up to 1920 psi. So there's no significant leak in there. Let's have a look at the plug. Here's the spark plug. It looks pristine. Now, talking with the customer, he said this spark plug was switched with another cylinder. There's a little bit of carbon deposits on that side, but it's not fouled. There's no carbon tracking on the plug. I've got a bore scope in the cylinder, looking at the tip of the injector, and there's a considerable amount of carbon on it, which could be cleaned up with top engine cleaner. Might run some engine flush through this thing, or injector flush through this thing, and see if it cleans up the tips of the injectors. I'd like to see if we could see the intake valves. I'm going to bump the engine over and see if we can look into an intake port. I got to pull my bore scope out, obviously, to bump the engine over. So the starter relay is this one right here in the corner, and I'm using a relay switch to bump the engine over so I can look at the intake valve, but it's really hard to see into the intake port from this angle, even with the camera. But there is a considerable amount of carbon deposits on the inside of the cylinder, so I suspect the carbon is built up on the heads of the intake valves. And we're in number 3. I just had a moment of worry there. I looked at it and I thought, well, I put it in number 1, but that's number 3. 1357 down this side. So I think what we're going to recommend is some top engine cleaner to run through this thing. I'm going to try that tonight. I'm going to clear all the codes, have the customer drive the vehicle. He says it can go 3 or 4 days before it sets a code. And if that doesn't work, we're going to recommend the walnut shell treatment on the intake valves. So you can see now we have 2130 psi. So we're going to run some top engine cleaner through the fuel rail. I'm going to disable the low pressure fuel pump, take the fuel line off, and hook up a flushing unit. Well, to get the release tool in there to pull the fuel line off, I had to pull the valve cover plastic trim off and the ignition coil on number 5 to get it out of the way. I tried to modify one of my release tools, heat it up with a torch, but I still couldn't get in there properly, so I'm gonna try and make this tool work once I get the line off so that I can use it next time. So this is what I'm using to flush the injectors. This is my injector flushing equipment. It's OTC. I've got about 3 ounces of this top engine, upper engine fuel injection cleaner mixed in some regular gasoline, about 1 liter of gasoline. I've got it run into the fuel supply line, into the fuel rail to the high pressure pump, and I got the fuel line from the low pressure pump capped off. It's just deadheaded. That doesn't hurt it because it runs like that anyways. And I'm going to run it at a fast idle and run it until it runs out of fuel. So it took about 10 minutes of running to use up the fuel in this 1 liter container. I also removed the map sensor and used this vacuum port here to introduce a can of combustion chamber cleaner using a piece of hose and spraying it into the hose. And now I'm just going to let it sit for a half an hour to soak, because that will soften up the carbon deposits in the on the valves if it got to them. It's a central located port in the map sensor hole there, so it should have gotten to them. I'm going to put the fuel system back together as it's supposed to be, and run some more top engine cleaner through the map sensor hole. You can see I've got the vacuum hose into the map sensor holes, and if I put this in here, get a little short burst, let it ingest it. This is the second can I'm going through now. This is worth a shot. Then we'll take it out for a significant road test. Of course, we're going to generate a pile of codes, misfire codes, map sensor codes, fuel dump codes. I tried removing the fuel pump relay, but that didn't kill the fuel pump. That's why I blocked it off. Okay, so that's the can. Got a can of clean flow air intake clean, and a can of combustion chamber clean. And we'll see what happens. Okay, let's see what kind of codes it's got in it before we go for a road test. Fuel pressure sensor, manifold absolute pressure, misfire, starter relay, fuel trim, bank 1. Okay, we're going to clear all these codes out. Go back, come on. Clear codes, yes. Continue, just make sure they're gone. Most GMs allow you to clear the codes with it running. Okay, now we're not going to judge any misfires right off the bat because there's a lot of that engine cleaner running through it, so we're going to drive it for a bit. What are you doing? Are you giving this truck the CAT scan? That must be what you're doing, right? What did you find? Did you find anything wrong? Eh? Nothing wrong. Photo bomber. Well, I had a little issue with my scan tool on the road test. It fell off the console and battery popped out of it and it shut off, so I was afraid I might lose this recording. I hope I still have all the files attached to this work order. At first it stumbled a little bit, but that's to be expected with that cleaner in the engine. So at one point the check engine light did flash on a heavy acceleration a couple times, but let's just see what codes it set. P0300. Let's see if it was cylinder 3 that was misfiring just the same. Data. As I said, my scanner fell off the console and battery popped out and had to come back to the shop and fix it, but I gave it the Italian tune-up. Well, that was cylinder number 1 that was misfiring. Cylinder number 1 with 37 misfires, and cylinder number 8. So I think that was just due to the engine combustion chamber cleaner still throughout the system, maybe dislodging some carbon deposits. So we're going to clear all the codes, and clearing the codes resets the misfire counters. So if I go back into the data here, all the misfires will be 0, or should be 0. Come on, you can do it. So everything's zeroed out. It's certainly not misfiring now. It's running real smooth. I'm going to give this back to the customer and tell them to drive it for a couple days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever it takes, and report back to me whether or not the check engine light comes on, or worse yet, if a check engine light starts flashing and it sets any codes. If it sets codes for the same cylinder misfire or P0300, I'm going to recommend the walnut shell treatment to the intake valves. Cool. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll be sure to post a follow-up if there's a second part to this.